Batman. Great character, great superhero, mostly thanks to Bill Finger. Iconic costume, kick-ass headquarters, great sidekicks, great supporting cast, killer ride, nice-ass house, hell of a love interest, probably the first or second best lineup of villains for any superhero, all of it tied together by one of the all-time great superhero origin stories. Or is it? Your typical superhero origin is all about the inciting incident, the moment in time where something happens that changes the course of a character's life from otherwise ordinary to the path of spandex-clad vigilantism. An alien baby is found by the Kents. Peter Parker gets bit by a radioactive spider but fails to use its powers to prevent Uncle Ben's murder. Reed Richards and company get hit by cosmic rays. Matt Murdock gets some stuff in his eyes. In the best cases, these incidents form the thematic foundation of the character's future exploits. Spider-Man's survivor's guilt drives him to protect others. The Kent's simple human decency leads Superman to become a guardian angel instead of a god. You know the drill. So too it is with Batman. Bruce Wayne loses his parents to a random act of street criminality, and since he's, in most versions, unable to find or stop the specific man who wronged him, he instead undertakes a broader symbolic quest, evolving beyond a mere need for personal revenge and instead seeking to protect other innocent families from the same fate by combating that same criminal behavior. And also psychotic gangsters with nicknames and ironic facial deformities because comics are weird. Makes sense to me, until it doesn't. See, Batman didn't really stay on that course the same way other superheroes tend to. The span and scope of his adventures got increasingly bizarre, and since a lack of powers is part of his gimmick, they had to keep giving him better and better gear. And that meant pumping up to absurd degrees the one power he actually does have: being born rich. In the early Batman comics, Bruce Wayne was only pretty damn rich. Old money, didn't have a day job, you get the idea. But by now, he's so wrapped up in the affairs of the broader DC universe that he routinely hangs out with aliens and gods, fighting apocalyptic wars, monitoring the globe with satellites, building space stations, and paying for most of it himself, because by now, he's freaking Scrooge McDuck rich. Which would have been fine if this had represented a broader continuing evolution of his mission, graduating from protecting only one city to protecting whole worlds like the rest of the DC pantheon. Sort of like how Green Arrow evolved from being yet another wealthy crime fighter to a politically active champion of the common man. But Batman didn't evolve, hasn't evolved. Every time he finishes up with his Justice League or Outsiders business, he goes right back to beating up muggers and the mentally ill in Gotham City, which not only now seems like small potatoes and a poor allocation of time and resources, it makes him sort of a dick at this point. Hear me out. If Bruce Wayne is rich enough to build a space station and outfit the JLA with future tech, why is there any low-level street crime in Gotham City? Remember, Batman is supposed to be like the smartest human in the DC universe too, so you have to figure Bruce knows from data, decades of study, personal experience, and plain old common sense that criminal behaviors like mugging, gang formation, breaking and entering, drug dealing, street prostitution, and found footage movie production are mainly exacerbated by poverty, unemployment, and general social disenfranchisement. If Bruce Wayne's concern really is just making Gotham streets safer, his money properly invested could easily pull the city's worst neighborhoods up to livable standards at least, open a few factories, spread some jobs around, or, failing that, he could just use his money to manipulate political power like the obscenely wealthy do in reality, i.e. become the corporate patron of politicians who'd institute what he concludes are necessary policies. In this case, likely being cranking up the federal assistance infrastructure. Not only would this work better than just waiting around on the rooftops for random ruffians to beat up, it'd be more efficient, and he could handle like 90% of this off-site from his Bat Blackberry while he's off fighting Starro or whoever with the other DC A-listers. And while some good old-fashioned urban renewal wouldn't get rid of all the crime, it'd get rid of most of it, to the point where even Gotham's police could handle things. And yeah, it wouldn't stop most of the big supervillains from doing their supervillain thing, but it would make it a lot harder for them to find the necessary henchmen if even a third of Gotham's poverty-class citizenry could just as easily work at a Froyo place or Chipotle instead. I mean, think of just how desperate you have to be to work for the Penguin. Oh, that would also mean a less crowded prison system, by the way, which means more effort could be expended on, say, keeping the Joker from constantly escaping that prison system. Basically, every non-Darkseid-sized problem Batman has, Bruce Wayne's checkbook and connections could solve better, and yet he's still doing this shit. And that's why Batman comes off like a dick now, because at this point the only reason to be going out every night and beating the bat snot out of the mentally ill and or people so destitute they'll risk committing crimes in Batman City would be because he wants to do it, because he gets a kick out of it. It's no longer reasonable to regard these as the logical, if more than a little personally symbolic, actions of someone for whom they represent the best course of action available, because they're obviously not the best or even most efficient thing he could be doing. Now they just look like the the actions of a rich brat who's bought himself a scenario where he can inflict violence on less well-off people who kinda sorta remind him of someone who made him very, very sad once. I mean, the richest dude in town spending way more money on increasingly violent ways to beat street thugs half to death than he's ever even considered spending on comparatively minor fixes to stop the system from producing these street thugs in the first place. That's kinda messed up when you get right down to it. That's some King Joffrey shit right there. The origin no longer fits together with the character, at least not if we're still meant to take him as a good guy. So what would a better origin be? The hell if I know, but claiming to protect a city in honor of your deceased loved ones by blowing it apart with a tank no longer fits together. I mean, maybe the Waynes could die some other way, like in a random accident or food poisoning, or maybe Alfred did it or something. Hell, do they even have to die for all this to happen? Bruce Wayne's various aesthetic preferences and or fetishes are pretty goddamn specific, so chances are he was gonna wind up on some version of rubber costume and punching people no matter what. Actually, bored rich asshole goes on stupid, largely ineffectual crime-fighting crusade until other superheroes show up to teach him how he could actually be useful to the world wouldn't actually be a bad place to take it. If you wanted to, which they clearly don't. Otherwise they would have, and this guy would still feel like a superhero instead of just some creepy rich weirdo.